Hello, Ames Chambers of Commerce members. This is Drew Camp, Vice President here at the Ames Chamber of Commerce, to do our Valentine's Day edition of the weekly legislative update. I want to go back and hit on a few of our top priority issues, which revolve around talent, economic development, business climate, and infrastructure. Jumping right into talent, the Invest in Iowa, which is really the biggest bill, the 1 cent sales tax increase that we've really seen as far as size and the amount of work that's going to need to go into getting it passed. The governor has proposed that. She had a big press conference for it on Wednesday, and she's going to actually be going around the state doing town halls to really push for support and answer questions about the bill. So hopefully we can get her here in Ames. It remains to be seen. They continue to roll out those town halls, but hopefully we will get her here so we can have a good conversation about that and some of the other priorities of the administration. A few important things to hit on with Invest in Iowa. One of the things, amongst other things, with impacting mental health and the child care tax credit and the water and land legacy with water quality and trails and recreation, and then also taking away the water excise tax, but then also doing some individual income tax reductions as well, and also impacting those triggers that were put in 2018 as part of the original income tax reform bill. There's also the piece I mentioned quickly but glossed over a little bit, that water excise tax. That's about $15 million that in state money that would then be possibly either go away or they could divert it towards another area. So think about things along the lines of the reinvestment districts that we saw back in about 2015. They would have passed those, and it was used for things like Mason City Town Square, a project in Davenport, a project in downtown Des Moines for the Hilton Convention Center Hotel. They're just really big kind of game-changing projects. And why I bring that up is if that's something that would be an option to bring back something along the lines of those reinvestment districts, Ames could definitely benefit from that. Because if you think about the project that we're looking at doing over Iowa State Center, that is a perfect kind of game changer and a catalyst project that they're looking at for things like that. So when we hear things like that, we're very interested, because obviously it could have a direct impact here on the heart of our community and some of the major projects that we in the university and the entire community have that we're trying to coalesce around. Also within talent, Future Ready Iowa continues to receive broad support. There's very little negative within that bill, except a few of the possibly unfunded mandates for computer science and some of the requirements of community colleges. Those are getting worked out. They always do. And that's something that'll happen once again, and we expect that bill to move forward with broad bipartisan support, which is really important because it positively impacts our workforce development efforts here in Story County. Within economic development, anytime we look at talking about tax reform, which I brought up in part of the Invest Iowa Act, they're looking at doing some income tax reform to individual income tax. But whenever that conversation comes up, we're also always going to bring corporate income tax into the conversation as well, because we always think that that is something that needs to be addressed too, to make us more competitive with our neighboring states and anyone else we're competing with on the global economy. But anytime you talk about corporate income tax reform, especially, the topic of tax credits come in as well. So you always have to kind of be prepared to defend the tax credits. Things like the high quality jobs, the research activities credit are really ones that a lot of times will come under the eye of legislators. So you have to be there ready to defend those and the value that they provide to our communities, which we of course are ready to do whenever we need to. With regards to business climate, the first one I'll touch on is the universal licensing bill. That continues to move forward. There's a lot of moving parts there. As you can imagine, when you're talking about universal licensing for essentially a broad cross-section of any career, you can think accountants, you can think lawyers, you can think teachers, you can think doctors, you can think all of these different things. Not all of them fall under that. But the idea of the bill is to be able to make it easier for people to move to the state and have their licenses and certifications transfer. Obviously, there's some stipulations in there, but also, as you can imagine, there's a lot of lobbyists that represent a lot of strong interest groups that require licenses, that want clarification, or they want something worked out for their respective professions. So that's something that does continue to move forward. We are supportive of the bill because we think it could positively once again impact population growth and workforce attraction and retention, and we'll continue to monitor that going forward. Another issue on business climate that's really been kind of a big one too, actually, this week. We always have talked about Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and that's something that we really stand strongly against, as do every business and essentially all major businesses and chambers and business organizations uniformly and consistently are opposed to that legislation. There was a subcommittee meeting yesterday down at the Capitol. The Senate Local Government Committee held a subcommittee on the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. The vast majority of people there to speak were in opposition, but they still moved it out of the subcommittee. So now it's open for full consideration by the full local government committee in the Senate. But the hope is that it won't go anywhere, and if it doesn't move out of that committee by the end of next week, which is the first funnel, February 21st, when Senate and House committees have to pass bills out of their committees for them to remain alive, that bill would then die. So obviously we are hoping that dies next week on Friday. It's really something that it makes it super hard to attract and retain talent. We've seen it in North Carolina, we've seen it in Indiana, we've seen it in a lot of the other states that have come forward with bills like this. The NCAA has standards and guidelines that they have put out for states that pass RFRA bills. But then also it's really huge on travel and tourism. And talking to our friends over in Indianapolis, it's a 3 to 5 year window, and they're right in the middle of that right now. And their conventions and visitors statistics and revenue have gone down as a direct result to RFRA, and they've seen a negative economic impact from RFRA as well. So we really, really hope that the Senate doesn't move that forward, and also that the House doesn't bring anything up. We'll obviously be defending it and be in opposition of it if it appears in the House as well. Also, last night the Senate voted on a party line vote of 32-18 to move forward a constitutional amendment to say that the state constitution does not provide for the right for abortion. That's another bill that we're monitoring as well, because it's similar to RFRA, that when people looking at possibly moving their businesses or moving to a state that passes bills like this, it's an adverse thing for people trying to come to this state. And as we try to grow population and grow our workforce, these are really some things that are having adverse impacts, and we don't really like to see those kinds of things. So that's something we'll continue to work on as well, because it has a negative impact on not only the business climate, but also on our ability to attract and retain talent. The last piece that I want to touch on is infrastructure. And really what we're looking at there are a couple of bills. Empower Rural Iowa will continue to move forward. That was one of the priority bills of the administration last year, and that really provides a lot of money to housing, workforce housing, but also to broadband expansion throughout the state. And as we continue to see increased investment from the federal government, we really want to make sure we're continuing that at the state level too, so you can leverage those two together and therefore make a bigger impact with broadband expansion throughout the state. Also invest in Iowa, as I mentioned, with the water quality and a lot of the water, the recreation and trails and those pieces with recreational enhancement and protection and those kinds of funds. That obviously too would go towards infrastructure, so we continue to monitor that and be in favor of that. But the governor also signed a bill this week into law that provides for additional appropriations, and it was really for the mental health facility that has received so much attention recently, to make sure that they can do an investigation into what happened there and correct what was going on there, but also provides $20 million for flood mitigation. And the Army Corps of Engineers is reporting that we're expecting floods on the Mississippi and Missouri again this year come flood season. So that's going to be really important to make sure not only we're repairing the damage that was done from last year, but we're putting systems in place that are going to be preventative, that we don't have those kinds of things affecting our vital river communities and the ag community that were really hit hard by those floods. So we want to continue to see investment in there, and we are fully supportive of that. As I mentioned before, when I was talking about the business climate issues, the first legislative funnel is next Friday, February 21st. And what that means is that if bills don't get out of their respective committees in the House or the Senate, they are dead. There are some exemptions. There are things like leadership bills, like the governor administration bills, appropriation bills, ways and means bills, constitutional amendments, things like that. Those all to go through. So those things are funnel proof. But we see a lot of these other bills that are in committees that don't qualify for the bypass there to avoid the funnel. Those bills will be dead if they do not move out of their respective committees by the end of next week. So we will have a lot more updates on that as we kind of can see which bills lived and which bills did not make it through next week. So please do come back and join us, as we'll have an exciting update next week with a lot of stuff going on down at the Capitol. So thank you very much for watching, and have a good weekend.